Hi, everyone. Lisa and Dan here from Fireside Strategic. We're on a mission to help business leaders achieve great results through human-centered strategy. We believe that businesses don't need to choose between investing in their humans and generating profit because it's the humans that create profit. In the Fireside Chat series, we're showcasing how leaders are transcending the challenges of the COVID-19 crisis and more broadly, unite strategic and human thinking and leadership. To kick off Tech Week on this fine Monday afternoon, we are excited to chat with Adam Broadway, CEO of platformOS. Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your story?
Well, thank you for having me. Thanks, Lisa and Dan, and to Eric Lurs, who connected us. Bit of my background, I've been in tech since the XT was a baby. And for those out there who are going, what's an XT? The 8088 processor, the first sort of mass-produced Intel PC was based on that 8-bit processor. I got into computer hardware, dropped out of school when I was 16 and just jumped straight into tech. I started building and selling computers when you actually made margin. And by the time the Pentium came along, the bottom had dropped out of hardware. Margins went from 300% to 3%. What's there next to do? So that's when software development kicked in for me. Build it once, sell it 1 trillion times for $1. And that was kind of my journey from a 25-year-old right through to now, nearly 50 and 6 kids later. So it's been an illustrious career, and I have to say lots of challenges along the way. And it is, as you said, all human-centric. The technology is just the enabler. The people that you surround yourself is what makes success.
Want to start out by backpedaling just a little bit and going back to a very human moment in your past, that moment of dropping out. Was that a point of uncertainty for you, or for you, was it really clear, yeah, I'm just going to drop out, screw it?
It was clearer and clearer as the days and weeks and years went on in the traditional schooling that I had. I was lucky in Australia. We had back then 2 different streams of education. There was the traditional sort of focus on maths and that type of stuff, and then the technical colleges where all the so-called dumb kids went. Those dumb kids now sort of run the economy, the electricians, the plumbers, and that. So I just couldn't stand school in general. And then with parents' divorces and all of that stuff, you just go, get me out of here. So I left for schooling reasons as well as personal reasons. And I have to say, looking back, it was the best thing that worked for me at the time. I don't recommend it, kids. Stay at school, get your high school certificate, and then think about next steps. But yeah, there was a number of factors that were going on in my life at the time.
I love how such a decision that looks like a business decision is actually so many different personal streams. So why tech? What brought you into tech at that point through until today?
Well, it started off, I was pushing trolleys at Safeway, the local supermarket, and in my lunch breaks as a 16-year-old, yeah, I was a checkout chick, as they called them in Australia, the first male checkout chick in my town. So I copped a lot of flack doing that. But pushing those trolleys, I would go in the lunch break to the local computer store, and Leanne Martin, hi Leanne, if you're listening, she was an ex-Hewlett Packard engineer who started a computer store. And I got my master's degree in computer science and electronics by going in on my lunch breaks from Safeway, and then she eventually offered me a job. That was the catalyst moment for me in getting in my journey on tech way back when. Somebody who just gave 2 bits of care for me as obviously a lost 16-year-old, and she took me in and mentored me through my learning process in technology. So yeah, it was a very human connection, although it was all centered around the excitement of tech at the time.
It's interesting. You found education that was more relevant to you. You also found education that was speaking to your humanity more, right? The regular schooling system just wasn't you. And so by dropping out, it wasn't that you didn't get an education, you just got it in a way that was more suited to you.
Absolutely right. And I think that's the future of education. And particularly now, as we've seen kids jumping online, all my boys are online. Obviously, half the world is doing things online where they have that opportunity to connect. For those that don't, we will see free bandwidth globally. That's a whole different conversation. But yeah, being able to give kids a path in education that suits their learning abilities. All my boys, I got, as I said, 6 boys, and they all learn differently, but they're just not suited for this traditional industrialized education that's been the traditional way. And I'm looking forward to that shifting.
That's such an important point. I love that. So interesting to think about how education has already been changing, and the COVID-19 crisis has shifted even more and more to this tech-enabled format that allows for more individualization.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Adam, to change gears a little bit, would you mind telling us and our audience a little bit about platformOS? And remember, Dan and I aren't really tech people, so if you could use language that us non-techies could understand, we would very much appreciate
All
it.
right. Well, the constriferation of the freddle and the conglomeration of the orifice is where it all gets started. And from there, everything just works.
Perfect.
So, in all seriousness, platformOS will step back a bit after my computer hardware initiatives and building stuff. Software and software as a service became a passion. My previous company, which I started with Bardia Houseman back in 2004, was software as a service. AWS didn't exist, Google Cloud didn't exist, Azure didn't exist, so there was no cloud-based services back then. You had to build your own servers inside a data center and then connect people to that service. So software as a service for us was content management, email marketing, e-commerce, blogs, forums, customer service tools. So all the typical tools that people use today as an all-in-one solution. And that company got acquired by Adobe in 2009. Then the next evolution is where to go from there, and that is going what we call down the stack. The closer you can get to the computer hardware, the more efficient you can make the code. It uses less power, better for the environment, and it can run faster. So we want to, platformOS is being able to run software or provide an environment for front-end developers to build literally everything, anything and everything, from your own Facebook for brands, LinkedIn. You could build your own LinkedIn. You could build your own Amazon or Etsy or Shopify. So it's the ability to build what we call low code on top of a platform where you don't have to worry about DevOps. And DevOps is the running of all the servers, making sure that the load balancers are going to scale up as you hit sort of critical points in the growth of your business. Will the servers be maintainable? Can you automatically scale? How are you going to handle that load balancing across your databases and across the front-end web app servers and your Elasticsearch clusters and your Redis, all that stuff? We take that pain away. So platformOS is all of those things behind a really elegant interface for developers to build marketplaces, e-commerce, CRM, and other SaaS services.
Sounds very cool. Now, again, with this, Lisa and I being very upfront with you about how ignorant we are of all of this, I'm a developer and I don't fully understand the cost of dealing with all of this stuff, right? And dealing with the DevOps portion of things. What's the cost if you're not solving this problem? What could go wrong?
The cost is, firstly, having a great team of people who understand all the intricacies of a back-end server environment, particularly one that needs to scale. Of course, there's all this talk of serverless. I don't know if you've heard of that term, the serverless environment. It's where you just say, look, run my software over there, and you throw it up and it just magically creates the servers and the databases and everything. When you have to deal with the operational end of the business, and that is the servers staying up 100% of the time, being able to issue certificates, secure certificates for the servers to be able to do encrypted communications between each other, to deal with denial of service attacks, to deal with all of those things, you need a really good team to do that. And if you don't, you'll outsource it to another team, and then you're kind of outsourcing your business in respect of dealing with all that back-end stuff. Now, when you're doing that yourself, it gets very expensive because you need really good DevOps people. And then you've got the other thing to think about is like, okay, this is running on Amazon Web Services, but I also need to possibly run things on Google Cloud or Azure, depending on who you're working with. Some companies require contractually to maintain a service on Azure versus Google Cloud versus AWS. And some DevOps people just focus in on one infrastructure provider. And our platform takes all of that away. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure. You can point to any of it, but you still have control over all of your code and all of your data or your client's data and being GDPR compliant or HIPAA compliant and all that sort of stuff. We just remove that pain so you can focus on the strategic business requirements and delivering that. But it can get very expensive, as everybody who's developed any kind of SaaS product would know that your back-end developers need to be really, really good, and they're quite expensive. So we take that away.
Understood. So you were mentioning, one of the biggest things you help clients solve is this expensive team need. Would you mind talking a little bit about your own team? How are you able to replace this super expensive, mega huge team with your own work?
Well, we've done that by building a team mostly through word of mouth. And having had a computer hardware and software background myself, being able to connect with developers who not just are exceptional with DevOps and with back-end coding and machine learning and all the various flavors of languages that we might be using, but also on the human side of things, what's their mindset like? How do they operate under pressure? Because that is a big deciding factor. When a server's got a problem or a client is screaming because something's gone wrong, and the perception is that it's our platform that might have been causing it, even if it's not, in the mind of the client, how does our team handle pressure? So I've been able to build an incredible team, and through word of mouth, build out that team. And I would say that there's this thing called the 10x developer. A senior developer is really good, great at their work, but a 10x developer can get 10 times more done. They're a little bit of a myth, because it does take a team. It's a combination of all of the various people, from QA, quality assurance team, the UX, UI team, the front-end developers, the back-end coders, the project manager, the business analyst. If they're not all operating together as a cohesive unit, then the client knows. And also the morale of the team goes down, because you'll have certain people. So how do you find those people? It's really tough. It takes years and years. And there's a lot of other nuances to building the team beyond just their skills. We have a global team that is distributed. So when everything hit us, it was a no-brainer. We're already doing remote work. We use online collaborative tools for design and project management and development. So that wasn't an issue for us. It is hard to find a cultural fit when you're dealing with people from lots of different countries that come from different backgrounds. You've got countries in Eastern Bloc countries who aren't used to encouragement, and they think you're hang on, you're encouraging me and telling me what a great job I'm doing? What do you want? Because they've come post-communism, and they've been kicked in the guts so many times, and the only time they hear from their boss is when there's the whip being cracked to go faster and make more money. That's, for them, it's like when they meet a team and there's some kind of encouragement around it, it's a culture shock. So how do you balance all the cultural elements of a distributed team when they've come from totally different backgrounds? And everybody, even within the US, it's like 50 different countries all glued together, because it's culturally and ideologies are different across states. So how do you blend that team? It's a real challenge, and that's why I think good managers are worth their weight in gold. Those that have the human element, and having a CHRO in charge of things in the business that think more human about the emotion and empathy across the team, and trying to bring different perspectives and deal with how arguments, and it's a real hard juggling act to do. But once you've got that right and people respect each other, irrespective of their point of view in life, they're unstoppable. And I've been very blessed to have that kind of team built over the last number of years. Big shout out to my team. Couldn't do it without them.
Yeah, I was actually born in Belarus, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Compliments are very confusing. But how do you do it? You bring up a really interesting challenge, building a singular company culture with not only do you have a distributed team that's working remotely, but you also have this international team. Like, what does it take to build a coherent single culture?
There's a little bit of luck thrown in there. Yes, we do word of mouth, and birds of a feather will flock together. So you'll have developers who work really well with other developers. And then you'll have a front-end UX expert who has worked with other team members in their past. And you go, okay, if you could build your own team, who would they be? And can you introduce them? So letting them be part of the conversation in guiding how things operate and what kind of standards you have within the business has a real big impact. Even if not everybody agrees on every topic, letting people have a voice in the conversation and allowing people to be heard helps in that. And what I like to do in my initial interviews with any new staff, and being a smaller team, I have that luxury. Not everybody does, but it's to understand what they are like as people and let them talk. As much as I'm yapping my gums now, I do like to listen, and I do like to ask, well, if you could write your own job description, what would that look like? What are your goals for yourself personally? Understanding, that's why CVs, when I read a CV, I go straight down to what their hobbies are. What are they like as a person? I don't care about your qualifications. What do you like to do outside of, what drives you? What are your passions? And those hobbies help to open up what kind of a person they are. And wow, they're really driven in these areas. And that's a really interesting side project they're doing. And wow, I think somebody thinking like that in the team will just add a dimension that we're missing.
So you're really curious to get to know these people as human beings. You're not just interested in how is this a cog that fits into my business machine, right? You want to know who are these as humans. Have you always hired like that, or did this idea strike you at some point and you just realized it mattered?
I think for me, it's always been about, and coming from the School of Hard Knocks and the University of Life, and understanding how people operate, and everybody has value. Like everybody has value. My grandfather, I remember watching a TV show one time. My granddad was a hard man. He was a one-legged ranger, rode a horse, and kept the poachers out of the waterways back home in Australia. Really tough man. But the one bit of advice he gave me that resonates, I was watching TV and this reporter was talking about something which I, as a 12-year-old, disagreed with. I said, "Oh, that guy's an idiot. Just shut up," And my grandfather clipped me across the back of the head, and he said, "Don't let me hear you talk like that. I don't care if you talk to an idiot for an hour, and all you get is 5 minutes of good information. That was an hour worth spending." It's like, wow. How do you? I stuck with me for a long time. How do you value an hour? Some people say, well, my time is so valuable, I could be, Bill Gates won't turn around to pick up that $50 note behind him because of the time it took to do that cost him that $100,000 he made walking to the next meeting. How do you do that? I think everybody has value. Everybody has something to say, and bringing that to the conversation with your team lets them know that they're valued beyond just how much they are per hour, which of course the economics of doing business is critical right now at this time it is. And for a lot of people that have been laid off, it's devastating. So yes, there's an economic point to the conversation, but without understanding who they are as people, you'll never get to the gem, the hidden value that sits behind it, because that person who's a so-so developer, they're dedicated. They come to work all the time. They're a can-do mindset. You can't put a value on that, and you'll never know if you don't have a conversation.
It makes total sense, and I'm also really struck by how much of this process you're outsourcing, by how willing you are to enable your team to have input in the hiring process. That can be tricky because for some people that hire, culture feels like this thing that we need to protect. We feel like we're putting it at risk when we enable others to have input into the process. But for you, you're more relaxed about it. For you, you want your team members to actually have a say, it sounds like.
Oh, that's true diversity. Diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity of, if we don't allow that and we pigeonhole what the ideal recruit is, and we don't really push down the walls of discrimination on thought or whatever, then how do we create a better product or a service? So yeah, I think it's really critical not to pigeonhole or have too many guardrails around that.
I love that, tying kind of the internal to the external. Changing gears a little bit. So you mentioned that this COVID pandemic didn't impact your business, the way you run your business too much. But I'm curious, did it impact your clients? And if so, how were you able to adjust?
Yeah, a great question. So it didn't impact us operationally. In fact, we shared a YouTube video on how we do business day to day using all the tools that everybody's now very familiar with, like online presentations and Zoom and ClickUp and Figma. Shout out to those teams too. Great job that they do. So we've always done that. It did impact us in economically, and I had to have conversations with the team. We kept our whole team together, and actually are now recruiting more. So there was a hump for us to get through because it was the great unknown. And a lot of people said, "Hey, that project is on hold now. Hey, we need to go into maintenance mode just till we get through this because we're not actually selling any products." So we take a hit on cash flow. That does have an immediate impact on the business. So operationally, no problem. That's how we do business. Morale, fear, uncertainty, doubt, going through the 5 stages of grief, being upfront in that conversation with the team. We had to jump in and we continue to do it because there is still that uncertainty. I think I lost track of the question, to be honest, and I'm kind of meandering now, but we had operational excellence already when it came to remote. Our clients were hugely impacted and we had to compromise with a few of them. And we then had to work with our team to work out, okay, how do we ensure longevity? Because we just don't know what's going to happen for the next 3 weeks, 6 weeks, now 8, 12 weeks of kind of lockdown. But we're in growth mode now, thankfully, and we'll come out a lot better than a lot of others. So that's all due to my team again. It wasn't magical management. It was talking to the team honestly, right up front, very early on, and giving them plan A and plan B. Hey, plan A is I want to keep the team together and we keep going with this juggernaut. Plan B is we rationalize and just maximize profitability and it's all about the bottom line. Sorry, non-essentials, bye-bye. And we'll just stick to the essentials and who can make money. No, didn't want to do that. So we did have some of those questions and everybody was part of it. Everybody came forward and took on a can-do, we're getting through this together mindset. And I've been very thankful for that.
From a service and product delivery standpoint, how did you make that transition from having to cut things down to now being in growth mode?
Well, the cutting down was really just I think, when a virus hits the body and you suddenly go into protection mode. The reality was that we ended up closing some other deals, albeit a little bit longer, that we already had in the pipeline that got deferred and then suddenly the pedal to the metal. So the deferment was really just a knee-jerk reaction to what was happening around. And so having the staff being aware of everything up front helped them understand that, yes, everything's going to be okay. We're just unsure about everything, and it has had an immediate impact. Now that we've gone into the growth mode, we share the same successes, and it's like, hey, things will be going back to normal. Not immediately, because things have dragged out a little bit longer, but hey, we've got these deals that are closing, and a lot of our channel partners, this has been an amazing point too, because we're a business with a lot of development channel partners who are building products on top of us. In certain verticals, they're seeing growth. So we're not completely reliant on enterprise deals coming in and closing. We've got a very big spread across different sales channels.
Yeah, there's so often this push to do something as specialized as possible. And what's great about what you're doing is you have a foundation that so many people can build on that in ways that you could never have anticipated, right? So long as the foundation is secure, development
That's exactly it.
so many different trajectories, right? So many possibilities you'll have never envisioned.
100%, exactly. And that's where going from a software as a service focus to more of a platform as a service and letting developers build for their clients literally anything. Start with a marketplace, add a learning management system, start with a services company and then sell products or do auctions or CRM, accounting. Our channel partners have been able to adjust their direction in where they focus based on the changes to their sales opportunities, and they know they can continue to build on platformOS to deliver that.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Having access to that diversity of opportunities for you and your channel partners is just a wonderful insurance policy, right? We think about diversity as a way to mitigate risk in so many different domains. And this is a new way of thinking about that.
That is a really good point. Yeah, it does. It adds the diversity of thought inside the team to ensure that you're always innovating, and diversification on a platform where it allows channel partners and builders to readjust their focus in a new direction based on whatever the environmental circumstances throw at them.
And probably part of diversity of thought for you is not just your team, but it's the diversity of channel partners as well. So the wider variety of them you have, the more ideas are going back and forth, right?
100%. That feedback loop is absolutely critical. And I have to say, when I think of my team, I do think of our channel partners as well, because they're a huge part of ensuring that that feedback loop is valid and relevant for those at the coalface. Like, we can make assumptions and do some time to time do some research, but they're right there working with the various industry verticals that they are specializing in, across everything from butchers and bakers and candlestick makers and everything in between, services, products, digital products. They give us that feedback based on what their needs are, and that makes for a great product.
That's super cool. Love, love, love that. So having now talked about sort of how you managed COVID, your general philosophy of leadership and company building, curious to now move over to a slightly lighter subject to end things. So we always like to ask the CEOs that we're jamming with, what are you doing for fun in a tricky, serious moment like this? How are you keeping things light?
Well, I love hiking. I love rock climbing. Just been able to take the family out for a hike the other day, which was awesome. I'm a drummer, so being able to have the drums set up in the garage and have a bit of a blast on music, they're the things I love. And I've got a fantastic partner, and we have a lot of common passions for the outdoors. So that's where breathing the fresh air, getting a grounding, putting a perspective on life and eternity is a really important thing for me. Keeps it all in perspective.
Nature, music, and family. Sounds like you've got it right.
That's it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in the same boat. Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. We learned a lot, and I love your general philosophy of leadership. I think it's so important for everyone across industries, tech and non-tech, to remember that it's the humans that build the companies, and it's the humans that are the customers. And as long as you get to know them, you'll always be learning. So thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Lisa and Dan. Appreciate it.
Such a pleasure, Adam. Such a pleasure. Okay, let's end the